The story that will be discussed in this video could be quite banal. The only unusual thing about it is that in this kind of case, it is very rare to be left alone with the criminal, to hear his train of thought, to understand what motivated him. This is a rather cruel story, especially the videos found by the police. In fact, this story is really not for the impressionable. Perhaps this story on the channel is about the most vile person, so for you this is the last chance to stop. The story begins on June 2nd, 1985. On this day, two men entered a store in San Francisco. They spent a couple of minutes choosing goods. Then, the store employees noticed that one of the two tried to take the vice that was being sold and leave the store. The store employees tried to catch him, but he started to run away and managed to escape. The store owner called the police. After that, the second of the two men approached him and said that it was just a misunderstanding, that he was ready to pay for what his friend had stolen. However, the police were already on the way. The store employees cut off the second man's chance to escape. As a result, the police arrived 10 minutes later. The police examined the documents of the man who remained in the store. Men, namely, the rights according to them, it was Robin Scott Stebley. Then they, together with the detainee, approached his car. It was a 1980 Honda Prelude. After examining it, a pistol with a silencer was found in the trunk. In the state of California, such things are prohibited. Therefore, the man was taken to the station, where he promised to tell where he got the weapon. However, before that, he asked for a piece of paper and a glass of water. He wrote a short text on the paper and then drank the water. Seconds later, he suddenly collapsed on the floor. The reason for this was that, unnoticed by others, he swallowed a pill with potassium cyanide that he had with him. The man was taken to the hospital, where he died 4 days later without regaining consciousness. It was obvious to the police that the reason for this behavior was clearly not the charges of possession of weapons. Of course, this man was hiding many more secrets. However, how dark they must have been that he chose death, although he had a chance to hide them. Well, in order to unravel the tangle of secrets surrounding the past of the man who committed suicide, the police did not have much initial data. However, there was one possibly key moment in this story before the death of the man. He finally admitted that his real name was not Robert Stebley, as it was on his license. Leonard Lake pretending to be Robert Stebley made no sense, because the photo on the license bore little resemblance to the actual appearance of the arrested man. It was the man's real name that began this eerie story. Now, knowing the name, it was easy for the police to establish the man's supposed place of residence. It was an ordinary apartment in San Francisco. However, upon arriving there, the police learned that Lake had not lived there for more than 3 years. Then the police turned to his ex-wife, a woman named Karen Balish. She, by the way, was much younger than Lake, but nevertheless, they married in 1981. Before marriage, they had known each other for 4 years. However, the marriage itself lasted only a year, after which the woman left Leonardo Lake. As she said, they remained on friendly terms, and Claren even allowed Lake to live on a remote ranch that she received from her parents. She was more attracted to big cities, so she essentially did not need a ranch. However, her ex-husband, Leonardo Lake, was very interested in this remote ranch, a piece of land. He eventually settled there, and the ranch was the place where the police went. It was a remote place in the woods of about 100 acres on this area. There was a house on the very first day. The police found inside the house several women's things, blood on a mattress, and a lot of equipment for photography and video filming. Here it is worth remembering that the license and the car that Lake had belonged to Robert Stebley, and the car, as it turned out, belonged to a man named Paul Costner, and Stapley and Costner were reported missing several months ago. This brought even more alarm to the investigation. On the first day, the police were unable to complete the inspection of the house because Clarence Ballish demanded a search warrant, which the police did not have at that moment. They had to wait until the next day to continue the search. Now, with a warrant, 2 cars were found on the property that belonged to Robert Scott Stapley. The man whose license Leonardo Lake had when he was arrested was particularly attracted by a small plot of land. The soil on it was bare and loose, as if it had recently been dug up. Having dug to a depth of half a meter, the police had already discovered something resembling bones. Experts soon determined that these were indeed human bones. Continuing the excavation, the police found 2 barrels. One was quite light, the other, on the contrary, incredibly heavy. The second barrel contained human bones. The first contained several identification cards from different people. They belonged to the aforementioned Robert Stapley and Paul Costner, as well as a young couple, Lone Bond and Brandy O'Connor, who were also considered missing, and they disappeared along with their 1-year-old child. I think it will not be difficult to connect the bones found in one of the barrels with the documents in the second. However, that's not all. Several video recordings were found in the barrels. This is probably incredibly rare for this kind of case, but some of these videos are available online. In one of them, Leonardo Lake talks about his desires.
Good evening. It's a Sunday in October 22nd, 23rd, something like that. It's very close to my 38th birthday. And I'm starting this tape without script or without any real organization of what I want to say. But I do feel I need to explain. This tape, what you're hearing now, is going to be the lead-in of the various phases of construction of building. The main emphasis of the building, the whole justification for its expense and its effort, will be a hidden portion of it, a secret room, if we can call it that, that will house a cell. This is the word that I've used in my discussions of this subject. A jail cell, if you will. And the purpose of that cell, and the main purpose, hence, of the building, will be the imprisonment of a young lady.
The second video is what shocked the police.
Probably at this moment is unknown to me.
So in the first recording, a girl named Brenda O'Connor is the same ID, whose ID was found in one of the barrels. Her hands are tied, and Lake tells her that she has a choice. either become their slave or they will kill her. Of course, the girl is interested in where her child is, to which Lake replies that he is now silent as a stone. It's not hard to guess what he means by these words. In the second video, a girl whose identity was unknown to the police. She is also offered to become a slave to Lake and the second man, the one mentioned at the beginning of the video who stole the vice from a store. Agree, this is quite disgusting and creepy. Even if you imagine yourself in the place of these girls for a second, you will already feel uneasy being in such a position when you have nowhere to run. Understand that no one will hear your scream and essentially understand that your life is over. However, you will die very slowly and painfully, judging by the situation in the video. The footage was not filmed in the house on the ranch. But then where? We didn't have to wait long for an answer to this question. Continuing the search of the ranch territory, something like an underground bunker upon entering. The first impression was that it was an ordinary tool shed. Inside were a hammer, bolts, a saw, and the like. However, one of the walls was unusual. It wasn't just a wall, but a door. When the police opened it, they found a room measuring about 3 by 1.5 meters. In the room, there was a wooden platform apparently serving as a bed, a bucket serving as a toilet, and toilet paper. On one of the walls, there was a window, like the kind we often see in movies. On one side, it served as a mirror, and on the other, transparent glass. Thus, on the other side of the wall, one could discreetly observe what was happening inside. At that very moment, it became obvious that this wasn't just a room, but a real prison cell. Also, on the wall, there was a list of 6 rules, probably for someone who had once been in this cell. I must always be ready to serve the owner. I must be clean. I must brush my teeth and be careful with things in the cell. I must not say anything until we are in bed. I must not look my owner in the eyes. Submission must always be visible in my gaze. I must never show my disrespect. I must never cross my arms or legs. I must be obedient in everything. I must always do what my master tells me to do immediately and without questions. I must always be quiet in my cell. I must understand that any trouble I cause my master will result in pain or even death for me too. Leonard Lake's diary contained many references to the book that was later made into the film The Collector. This book is about a guy who collected butterflies until the moment when, in his fantasies, butterflies were replaced by a girl named Miranda. Based on what was in Lake's diary, this book and later the film had a very serious influence on him and, in fact, became a kind of guide to action for him. At this stage, the police already knew the identity of Lake's accomplice. They received this information from Lake's ex-wife. It was Charles Chadang. Let's dive a little deeper into their past. Leonard Lake, a native of San Francisco, was born on July 20th, 1946. His father abandoned his mother after the birth of his boyfriend. Lake's mother was, to put it mildly, not a very modest woman. She wasn't embarrassed to walk naked in front of boys, and sometimes slept with men for money, seeing nothing shameful in it. Overall, from a young age, the boy became accustomed to the naked female body. For some unknown reason, his mother encouraged his desire to photograph and spy on naked girls, mostly herself or Lake's sisters. When the boy was 13, his mother gave him to his grandmother. From that day on, the boy rarely saw his mother. During his school years, Lake extorted sexual favors from his sister in exchange for protection at school. Then, after high school, Lake joined the Marine Corps in 1966. He spent some time in the Vietnam War then underwent 2 years of psychiatric therapy for unspecified mental health issues. He returned to civilian life in 1971. Lake had a reputation as a gun-loving hunter and a man preoccupied with sex. His favorite pleasure was filming bondage scenes involving his female partners. Soon his first wife got tired of her husband's fantasies and they separated. Then, in 1977, Lake met his second wife, Clarelyn Balash. For years, they were in a relationship before they married in 1981 a year. Before that, in 1980, Lake was charged with grand theft. However, he got off easy with 1 year of probation. With his second wife, Lake also lived in marriage for a short time because his fantasies required the submission of women. However, this did not accept Clarelyn, and eventually they divorced after which Lake moved to the ranch of his ex-wife, Lake's accomplice Charles Reed. Born in Hong Kong in 1961, he was the son of wealthy Chinese parents. However, the boy was always a problem for them. The main problem was the boy's penchant for stealing. The reason was mainly not about money, but probably the boy suffered from kleptomania. In his youth, he was excluded from a school in Hong Kong and then from a prestigious school in England. The reasons were that he was caught in numerous thefts. Then the guy stole as much money from his parents as he could and went to the United States, where he bought fake documents and joined the army. However, there he was caught stealing, namely, trying to sell weapons. Charles realized that this weakness of his again promised him trouble, so he fled before the trial, which led him to meet Lake, who, through an ad in the newspaper, was looking for an assistant to build a bunker. Lake probably did not intend to reveal all his plans to the assistant, but later, realizing that their interests were similar, he nevertheless began to share his ideas with the guy. Together, they began to obtain weapons from illegal sources and resell them. In April 1982, a group of federal agents raided their warehouse. The men were arrested. They were charged with violating weapons regulations. Lake was released on bail of $6,000. Finding himself free, he, using various aliases, hid Charles Chienga by this time. The fugitive from justice had already been denied bail in August 1982. He made a deal with the military prosecutor's office. He pleaded guilty to theft in exchange for a promise not to serve more than 3 years of 14 years. As a result, Charles was released after a year and a half. After leaving prison, he avoided deportation to China. He returned to California and again teamed up with Leonard Lake. By this time, the Lake bunker was already completed, and Lake himself had already committed several murders. As a result of the diaries, videos, and photographs found, as well as bones found on the ranch, the police were able to establish that on May 22, 1983, Lake killed 36-year-old Charles Gunner for the purpose of robbery. Then he kidnapped the family of 29-year-old Harvey Dupps, 33-year-old Deborah Dupps, and their 1-year-old child. This sounds incredibly cruel, but in front of her husband, Lake carried his wife. Then he killed Harvey, and judging by the videos that the police found, as stated in their reports, he used such brutal sexual torture on Deborah that she died. Then, together with Charles, they killed 33-year-old Randy Johnson and 23-year-old Michael Carroll for profit. Then, in 1985, they kidnapped the girl we saw on video. The one the police couldn't initially identify turned out to be 18-year-old Kathleen Allen. She was later also killed. Lake and Charles's next victims were Robin Scott Stebley, Lone Bond Jr., and Brenda O'Connor, the girl we also saw on video. These people rented a cottage for the weekend near Lake's house. As you might guess, they were eventually kidnapped, but also the last Paul Costner, he was also probably killed for the car he was selling, the same Honda that Lake was driving when he was arrested by the police. They even managed to find an ad for the sale of this Honda in the newspaper. Even taking into account all of the above, it is believed that the listed list of victims is far from complete. Another 14 people whose photos were found at Lake's place should be added. Some of them, namely 6 girls, turned out to be alive. Lake probably did not keep them in the bunker, and they were photographed voluntarily. The rest, also girls, aged approximately 12 to 30 years old, were never identified. Well, Leonard Lake was dead. All that remained was to find Charles E.N.G. This may sound ridiculous, but he was caught stealing again about a month later in Calgary, Canada. It is important to note once again that this had already happened in another country. In Canada, he could only be charged with illegally carrying a weapon that he had with him when he was arrested. During the trial, he was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison. After serving his sentence, the United States demanded that ENG be extradited to the state of California. Charles's lawyers appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada with a statement that his extradition violated the provisions of the Canadian Charter of Rights. As a result, after a 2-year international dispute, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled in favor of Charles's extradition. Ngaho was returned back to the United States in September 1991. After extradition in Gand, his team of lawyers began manipulating the legal system to delay the start of the trial in the 1990s. He filed several frivolous lawsuits and complaints against prison authorities, including allegations of poor food mistreatment, the inadequate strength of the glasses he was given, numerous searches of his cell, and a ban on origami. He also filed 5 motions to move his trial to Orange County. The last of these motions was ultimately granted in 1994, but the trial did not begin until October 1998. During a guilty verdict, Nga was fully proven on the basis of which he was found guilty of committing 12 murders. On July 1, 1999, he was sentenced to death, after which he was transferred to death row for execution. At that time, the trial of Charles Young became the most expensive in the history of California and cost $14 million. As of 2022, 65-year-old Charles is alive and continues to await the execution of the death sentence. He has been waiting for it for almost 25 years. Of what has not yet been said, this is the note that Lake wrote at the station before his death. In it, he confessed his love to his ex-wife. Clearland explained his suicide with the phrase, "Freedom is better than anything else," and also asked for forgiveness from his mother. In this whole story, it is very paradoxical that Leonard Lake and Charles Young might have taken more than one life, if not for Charles's stupid craving for theft. In fact, the price of the lives of their potential victims was $15, the amount that the vice stolen from the store cost. And now Leonardo Lake's thoughts on life and women, his motives. He explains everything quite clearly, although he's cruel.
"22 or the 23rd or so, very soon my 38th birthday.
Son.
I begin this entry without a script and without any plan of what I'm going to say, but I feel that I must explain something. This entry you are now hearing will be the main one. At various stages of construction of the building that I hope will be the first of a series of underground structures. The building will be for different purposes. It will be a workshop and a storeroom for storing many valuables and different things that are useful to have. Especially necessary items for the home. But the main purpose of the building, justification of all the costs and efforts on it there will be. A hidden part of the building is secret room, if you can call it that, in which there will be a house. A cage, this is the word I use in my reasoning on this topic, a prison room if you like, and the main purpose of this cell of this building will be imprisonment of a young girl whom I probably don't know now. And nothing more. Well, in general I have nothing more to say. The building and even the cell will be multipurpose. This is a very difficult time. Many wars are happening, therefore, having secret underground rooms protected by concrete and steel buried under 4 feet of earth is a fairly safe investment. The rooms of the building and the entire series of buildings will be designed no longer as detention cells, but in the concept of a secret safe residence for me and perhaps for friends. But at this first stage it would be a lie to say that it was nothing more than just a cage for now. History may be boring, descendants may not be very interested in this entry, and what I want to say, to be honest, I'm not very sure to whom I want to show this entry and whether I will show it to anyone at all. But for those who are interested, and for those who need justifications why I want to cage and effectively enslave a young woman. Just look at me, I'm a realist, I'm 38 years old, a little chubby, I don't have much hair, I'm losing what I have, I'm not particularly attracted to women, or should I say that I'm not particularly attracted to women. And the traditional magnets of money, a position of power, I do not have, and yet I am still I need sex and I am still very attracted to a certain type of woman who are almost by definition not interested in me. A dirty old man, a pervert. I am attracted to young girls. Sometimes even as young as 12, although to be honest, from 18 to 22, almost the ideal range as far as I know. I like very slender women, very beautiful, of course, petite, with small breasts, with long hair, and such a woman of her age, her attractiveness and desirability for certainly the majority of people just has options. She has no special reasons why such a woman should be interested in me, but that's not all. It is difficult for me to explain my personality in 25 words or less, but I am really a loner. I enjoy peace, solitude, and silence. I like being alone. Although my past relationships with women were sexually successful, my social life was almost always unsuccessful. I went through 2 divorces and countless women, 50 to 55. I forgot the exact number. I tried to count recently. I'm afraid the final statement will be that I'm just a sexist slob. I like to use a woman, and of course women are not interested in being used. I certainly like sex. I like to dominate. Mounting a woman, using her body, but I'm not really interested in all those things that a man must do to satisfy a woman's needs. Now I can simulate these things very well, and in the past I was very attractive to very interesting and beautiful women simply because I was very good at faking interest in their needs. And once, so for a moment I got what I wanted. They thought they were getting what they wanted, but in the long run I don't want that. All I want is a willing sexual partner. I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want, and when I'm tired or sated, I'm bored or uninterested, I just want to put her away, lock her in a small room, out of my sight, out of my life, and thus avoid what until now was a duty: entertain, amuse, or satisfy the emotional whims of a woman or girlfriend. This is a scheme, of course, not only blatant sexist, but also highly illegal. There is no doubt about it. It violates all human rights and blah blah blah. I have kept my ideas about other people's morals. I explain my morals, what I feel, what I want, and from now on I will try to get it.
options. There's no particular reason why such a woman should be interested.
The advantage of such a situation is of course obvious, and even beyond the sexual benefits, a completely enslaved woman would be useful for the routine work that I have to do but which I don't want to do, cleaning the house, washing dishes and so on. Slaves, there is no point in avoiding this word. First of all, a sex slave not only I believe that I can build a place where I can put such a woman, and from where I can leave without fear that she can escape. I can create a room, too, that will be so harsh and empty, so cold, quiet, completely isolated from the world, that quite quickly, through a combination of painful punishments if I am dissatisfied, small rewards such as music magazines, I can create conditions. This is what I believe in order for the girl to completely obey. I was actually looking forward to the opportunity to obey just like that for no reason, because this behavior would relieve her boredom. Will I be able to do this or not? It's obvious that I've never done this before, and it may not work. However, I want to try. I want to try. The cost of all this will be huge. We're talking about $5,000, $1,000 for the foundation, $2,000 for the bricks, hundreds of dollars for power equipment to dig the ground, lots and lots of expenses. But still, I live boring. The task of this project, excitement, a thrill if everything works out. And even a thrilling experience if not, as long as I don't get caught. This is all very tempting. This is what I fantasize about every day. We'll see. I don't think there's anything else to say about it. I hope this will be a historic event starting tomorrow. I'm starting to clear the land. I hired a man with a chainsaw to come and cut down some trees. Tomorrow evening will arrive excavator and I will begin to dig the earth. It will be interesting to watch this entry. You can come in.